I'm your host, Marlo Lemon, and you're listening to Wild Voice, the podcast where I take this voice of mine and share my wild journey with you. Being widowed at 34 with a 15-month-old, most would see as life ending. And instead, I alchemized it and put life back together, and it became more beautiful and fulfilling than I could have ever imagined. Through this life shift of mine, I realized who I am and what I'm here to do. I'm an intuitive energy healer, and sharing how I view the world is how I help you upgrade your life and alchemize your journey into magic. From day one, I wanted to share my journey, call it intuition, but I knew it was going to do more good out in the world than keeping it to myself. So when I say I've mastered life, that doesn't mean I'm perfect or that life is. I mean, I've mastered the concept of life, and I want to share that with you. So, life update part 2. Since I'm all about real life storytelling, I think I'm going to start doing more of it here for a bit. My life is the way that it is for a reason. So let's call this season of podcasting the evolving into more storytelling phase. Taking us back to my and Nash's move to this little beach town a little over a year ago, it felt expansive, right, and uneasy all at the same time. The uneasiness was from the what ifs that were trying to make themselves known very clearly. My ego trying to give its opinion. Like, you know what happened the last time we were in a relationship, right? Or how about you know how vulnerable this makes us? I felt completely exposed, but all the reasons it felt right outweighed the things my ego was bringing to the surface. That doesn't mean it was an easy transition, though. What I was processing internally was pushing me to evolve and grow. One of my past limiting beliefs was that the longer I am with someone, the more they fall out of love with me. Like the more they get, the less they want. Well, moving to the same town as someone sure gives them more of me. So it's interesting to see the stories we tell ourselves that we start to stand behind as truth. When I trace that shit back, it goes way further back than my marriage to Bob, but it was highlighted there for sure. So human and so backwards. Once I realized that was even a narrative on board, then I could tackle it with one of the many tools I had in my toolbox. I could see which hat to put on in that moment. Was it a job for my YOLO hat and just say fuck it? Or maybe the unconditional love hat, seeing all the ways I am worthy of love just by being me. Or maybe it was in fact a job for my healer hat, something more deep-rooted that needed to be cleared out for good. I needed to replace my limiting belief and prove it was wrong, replacing it with my soul understanding on why the more someone gets of me and witnesses how I do life and what I draw in, create, and evolve into, the more appealing and intriguing and attractive I become. It's a weight lifted when we get practice at seeing ourselves through the eyes of Source. Now again, insert whatever you believe in when I use the word Source is my representation of a higher power. We start to see how amazing we truly are in every form. I also had this knowing it's just not possible anymore with how much I've evolved to get anything less than soul alignment. My soul has come too far, so it has zero tolerance for anything outside of what is in my highest good. So I'm giving you a very personal behind the scenes look at a snippet of my human mind. I call my human mind the part of me that is more extreme with emotions, the part of me that plays the coulda, shoulda, woulda game and tries to do life the old school way every once in a while. It's almost like I need those moments so I can see for myself how much the upgraded way of doing things is now so much more impactful. What I've noticed is there are parts of me that are still learning to walk when there are a lot of parts of me in life that I'm running. As I've learned myself and teach others, the more we learn and grow from our experiences, especially the tough ones, that is our ticket of confirmation that it will never happen again. We've punched that ticket. That doesn't mean we aren't going to be tested or triggered in a similar way, though. But those moments are to give us chances to do things different, so we can see the big, scary past trigger actually no longer has a foundation to build upon. The other nice part about where Nash and I were moving to was the youthful, family oriented community we were getting plugged into. Those initial connections the boyfriend facilitated. With time, it seemed to naturally build on those friendships on my own. When I'd come to visit, we'd do beach fires or dinners or random beach hangs, and I'd even plan and host soul circles. If you aren't familiar with those are my group mini healing sessions I put together. So by the time we moved, I felt the support and excitement from a lot of amazing humans. The move was work, but with the boyfriend, old friends, and new ones, the move was mostly seamless. The most inconvenient part was reverting back to college days of trying to maximize space in our little mini beach pad. When I say small, I want to say it was like 600 square feet, maybe. So bins packed under the bed and hiding and stacking things in places that could only be gotten to with a stool, and not to mention a storage unit in town for the overflow. We were officially moved into town. With moving behind us, the thing on my mind most was making sure Nash adapted seamlessly. I knew we wouldn't have gotten this far if this wasn't good for him too. I have this innate knowing that if it's good for me, it naturally is good for Nash. There is also some truth to the idea, though, if your kids are good, you're good. I think maybe they go hand in hand. I knew I wasn't expecting perfection, but as a parent, we just know when things are going in the right direction. Well, with a new school, new house, new vibe, new environment, new routine, and new person in our day-to-day life, Nash was doing amazing. I continue to be so amazed by him and his ability to adapt. He is by far the bravest person I know. What he has tackled in his short 6 years is something I am in awe of, and I'm so proud of the person he is. I want to talk about expectations for a second. I've learned my lesson with expectations, and I continue to. And I stand behind really holding strong on continuously working the muscle to drop those. But I am human. That's what this episode should be called. Hey guys, let me tell you all the ways I'm human. So this transition into this new beach life with a boyfriend that lived on the same street in the heart of our little town, well, we'll just call this the emotional mastery stage of my life. My job in this life is to go through the things so I can share them. Well, I will tell you, mastering our emotions is one of the most valuable superpowers to master. So here we go. My expectations were light in general until I started to see consistencies. When I start to count on things, let's say like dinner every night as our time to connect, or thinking because we just live less than a minute from each other, having a consistent sleepover buddy should be happening. See, it's that should, right? When those things wouldn't happen or would go from consistent to not, this is when my emotions would kick in. I've done an episode on emotions and a handful of interviews have addressed them. They are a fucking bitch. I say that with the most love and admiration and frustration for them. Our emotions kick things up in a way that feels so uncomfortable. Insert the skin crawling feeling and wanting to run from ourselves. I've mastered enough of myself and how we operate as, you guessed it, humans, that I know it feels like our body is being taken over by something else. Because it in fact has. Have you had an experience like that where your emotions took over and you felt out of control? Or you didn't recognize yourself, but in the moment you would swear on anything that it was the most accurate perception of things? Our emotions can rule us sometimes until we can see what's happening. With each frustration or emotion or disappointment or sadness or fearful thing that my old life was being repeated, I was breaking through old things and patterns and getting really good at integrating my tools of emotional mastery. I had to break old stuff that in my head was a memory that elicited fear or worry or, oh shit, this feels familiar. Am I repeating my old life? I started to see these moments as gifts. As reminders, I still had something to heal or take away from the situation, and how all arrows point to the tough times as magic. By replacing those memories with actually what those moments were intended for, I released the pain and worry it was going to be repeated, because it's just not possible. Picture me like a scientist in a lab coat with really cute glasses on, and I'm molding and playing with different formulas to ultimately feel how I want to feel, to create the life I want to create, to see the things I want to see, to attract what I want to attract in a partner. Now, the soul complement's job is to not appease the ego. So going in, I knew that was always going to be bumped up against. But the movement through tough moments and coming out the other side, it's like the Wizard of Oz when it goes from black and white to color. It's so worth it. When it comes to a disagreement or argument or pain point, who is right or wrong, honestly, I could give two shits. When Bob died, I really could care less about pointing the blame. I just wanted to feel better. And I was willing to drop my ego and do what it took. The boyfriend and I, we were figuring out how to operate together. And the things that would come up felt more like planning for future moments of tension and how to diffuse them instead of those moments being a negative thing. The boyfriend and I have done a lot of work together and on ourselves to be able to access this depth in our relationship. Another big takeaway during this new phase was learning what it is I actually want to say, what it is I actually want, and how to go about saying it. Something I have learned about myself over the years is that I'm learning life all over again. Life looks different. I process it differently. I want different things. So the way I operate in a relationship, that is like learning how to walk again. I'm not someone who loses their voice. And when it comes to speaking up, sometimes I do in my relationship, not for anyone else's doing, but my own. Because I used to use my words in ways that weren't helpful. I would start talking and arguing before I even was really clear on what I was really wanting to say. And that can be quite messy. On the flip side of that, I can have the tendency to keep my cards too close with the intention of not unloading my stuff onto someone else. The sweet spot is doing enough legwork to see clearly, get the emotions down, and come to the table to tackle something together. It's why you're in a relationship together, right? You both obviously have lots to offer and things the other person doesn't necessarily have. So something else I found helpful as of late is checking in to see which hat to put on in any given situation. There were times I try to come to the table as Marlo the healer, and that is not only exhausting, but it shortchanges my experiences. Coming to the table with everything is tiring. In one of my classes, they joked about me being a one-woman band, and that burns me out fast. So instead, I see what each situation needs. And I still am practicing this. Does this convo need my healer hat or girlfriend hat? Does Nash need my mom hat or YOLO hat? Does my day need to start with the hat of all the to-dos or the pleasure hat? Which one is going to set myself up and everyone else around me for success, for alignment, for joy? With some really deep conversations and just the consistencies of doing life together, the boyfriend Nash and I started to become a little unit. We would consistently do dinners together, go to the gym, Nash's sport practices and games, grocery shopping, school events. And the most magical part is we just felt included in someone else's day, in their decisions. Like, what better way than for someone to make you feel important and show you you're seen than by making intentional time for you? I've always said it's more about quality than quantity. If you're telling me I get 30 minutes of your presence, or connecting time, or hours of disconnected scatter time, I'll pick the quality all day, any day. The nice part is something magical happens when we do that. We start to see how fulfilling those moments are. And both parties just naturally start to make more time for them. I mentioned in a past episode, we have about 10 things that make us feel special or important or loved in a relationship. One of mine is being considered. Even if plans have nothing to do with me, the fact someone thought about me to fill me in on their day and their plans, or see if I want to be a part of them, or hey, I'm doing this. How do you feel about that? Or I'm going to do XYZ. I'd love for you to come with. Or I'm doing XYZ. I know we haven't had much time to connect. Let's make cookie dough together and hang out on the couch tonight. Or I have so much I need to get done. How about you just come over and work on your computer over here? I would just love being in the same space as you. These were absolute game changers in our relationship. I felt the dynamic shift. I felt us upgrading the ways we do things and talk with each other. We started to get into a really solid routine. Things I really could count on that felt safe, that felt grounding, that felt like we could build upon. If I had to look back and see when the biggest shift happened, it's about 8 months into our new beach life move. I had been doing a lot of writing and was coming to the point I was ready to start recording the first few episodes of this podcast. With the boyfriend being in the film industry, recording audio and editing is literally something he can do in his sleep. So with enough conversations in his magically masculine way, he told me he wanted to help. He wanted to get me set up with his equipment and help me record those first handful of episodes and edit them for me. I was speechless and overwhelmed with gratitude. I was even a bit stunned. We started by working on the wild voice intro you hear every time you start a new episode. The day he pieced it together, I was standing over his shoulder in his office, and he played what he had edited. Tears started to well up in my eyes as it played. I tried so hard to hold it back. I felt so vulnerable, so overwhelmed, in a good way, and so exposed with what I was about to put out into the world. This tall drink of water was literally the first person to ever hear anything I created. There's something very vulnerable and beautiful in that. This journey, this process, as much as I'm open with it, I equally hold it that close to my heart. So a big step in all directions. As the intro finished, he looked over at me, totally in work mode, awaiting feedback and curious as to what I thought. Trying to keep my composure, I could see he wasn't expecting that response. I told him it was great and walked out of the room with tears filling my eyes fast. I went and stood outside his apartment on his deck with tears running down my face in between taking deep breaths. This has been such a long time coming. So much has gotten me to where I'm at, to get to this point, to even align with a boyfriend who in all the ways was supporting my heart and soul, literally and figuratively. I was wiping my tears when I could tell he came out onto the deck. I turned around and gave him a half smile, and he asked if I was okay, and doing his little check-in he's always so good about. I nodded, and he just hugged me as I was still partially crying, but also trying to make it stop. I just told him it was a lot, and it has been a long time coming. And at this point, my crying face was pretty much being smothered between his pecs. Because of our height difference, I was practically motorboating him with my tears. He smiled and kissed me and told me all the ways it was amazing and what I am putting out there, and we walked back into his place together. He had a smile on his face, which made me have a smile on my face, wondering what was so exciting in this moment to him. As I followed him back to his office with a grin on his face, he said something along the lines of, "You know, this is exactly what I look for with what I create, right? If you make someone cry, it means you nailed it." As he sat down in his chair and held one of his hands out to have me come closer to him, I just laughed under my tears as he squeezed me next to him, and we finished finalizing that intro. Every time I hear this podcast intro, I remember that sweet moment, and I use it as a reminder of how beautifully life balances itself out. The next big shift was when I spent a few days recording in his office for the first 4 episodes of my story that you've heard by now. One morning, he left my place and said he was going to start working through those to help me reach my launch date goal, which was only a week or 2 away. He made my soul pull his priority, and it was something that was so genuine and heartfelt and meant the world to me. I didn't hear from him much that day, and I figured he was just busy working on other projects, which is the norm. I also had this feeling of, oh shit, is he really going to be able to handle this story when he hears it in its entirety? We were getting later into the day, and Nash and I were about to run out of the house, and I noticed a text from him. He said he had a surprise for me and to check my email. Thanks so much for being here. Please rate, like, share, and review so we can stay connected and continue this magical journey together.